In 2018, there were over 200 reported hate crimes against LGBT people in Nigeria. Now, these were crimes carried out by fellow citizens, individuals who felt empowered to carry out acts of hate against another human being simply because of their sexuality.
They came down from the bus with guns and they had their uniform. So they asked me to bring out my ID card, which I did. And one of them said I was looking like a lady in my ID card.
I didn't remember to be scared. I just pictured the end. I tried to imagine how this tragedy was already going to play out.
So the boy was trying to escape, but it was too late. They dragged him back, they started beating him, everything. At the end of the day, I don't know where they take him to.
Now, there's certain fundamental rights that every Nigerian citizen is entitled to. The right to privacy, the right to life, the right to freedom of association and assembly. Actually hold that, because LGBT people in Nigeria have that last right, the right of freedom to assembly and association, severely limited.
Is there ways in which we use legal structures and violence and oppression to determine someone's ability to live fully?
I think this is why we're here, to increase people's knowledge of their rights.
So I'm very happy to know that the statistics, the data is showing that perceptions are changing, that people are becoming more aware of the real life implications of these laws. Because I think when people don't understand that these laws affect people on a day-to-day basis, then they're less likely to care. So I'm really happy.
Change is coming. It's slow. It's taking a while, but it will surely come.
None of us is free until all of us are free. This is how we can have a more inclusive and a more diverse society. My name is Aritoko. Thank you for watching. Hello and welcome to Untold Facts. My name is Aritoko. Gender, sex, and sexuality are three terms that are often misunderstood. So they're used in the wrong context or they're used interchangeably. Let's think of today as an Identity 101 class where we break down these topics and teach you not just what they mean, but the correct ways to use them. I have two incredible guests with me today and I'm very excited about the conversation we're going to have. So first I have Progress Lanre Oladimeji, who I love that you say you are a life enthusiast and a storyteller because it's actually very descriptive of the person that you are. And to be more formal, you're a reproductive health specialist and a sexuality educator. And we also have Wilfred Okichie, who is a public health practitioner with experience working with minority populations. So we're going to have a wonderful conversation. Let's start with the term sex. I feel like breaking into song, but you know. What does it mean when people say sex, especially within the context of LGBT conversations? Yeah.
Okay, sex by definition, this is the biologically ascribed roles where what makes one a male or a female. So most times these things are beyond the physical. It also involves both the physical and the internal makeup of an individual genetically. You now call the person either a male or a female. Most times it's biologically ascribed.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So Wilfred, can you tell us what the term sex means?
Sex. Sex is more of biological identity.
Okay.
So it's the characteristics. Not all physical, but okay. We are mostly used to the physical. Okay. But it's the group of characteristics, you know, that make up a person's biology and physiology. Okay. So it could be male. Okay. It could be female. Okay. It could be others. But most of the time, we tend to group sex as just male or female, but I think that's the conversation, that's part of the conversation that we want to have here today.
And yes, we're going to go into it. No, this is great. I like that we're starting like this. So when we talk about the characteristics, you know, can you explain what some of those characteristics are? That makes you say, okay, when this and this characteristics are together, then this is the commonly assigned name.
Okay, it could start from the chromosomes.
Okay.
It could then move on to the gonads, the genital organs. It could move on to the internal sexual organs. It could move on to the external sexual organs. Because we are human beings and we are very moved by the physical and what we see. We tend to look at, once a baby is born, and we look at the external. I don't know, Lanre has some nursing background, so I would say when the midwives look at the external genitalia, and they're like, oh, madam, this is your baby, it's a boy or it's a girl. Yes. So because of that, that tends to be the what describes sex. But it's really more than that.
It is much more than that. Yes,
so it tends to ignore the internal sexual makeup. It tends to ignore the chromosomal makeup. Yeah.
And okay, I'm trying not to run ahead of the conversation. Sure. I really like how you're breaking it down in saying that it's not just about the external genitalia, but also there's a lot more going on inside that needs to be put into consideration.
Exactly.
Okay, let's skip to sexuality. Lanre, what does sexuality mean?
When we hear sexuality, most times it transcends sexual feelings, expressions, and the likes of that. I often tell people, or I see it from this angle, sexuality is the elemental and integral part of a human. What that just says is that is a total expression of a person, and so this includes everything that comes in between. So it's a process from birth to death, and you know, expressing the femaleness or the maleness of an individual. So it comes with a lot of things around being who you are, your values, your beliefs, your identity, the gender characteristics, the sexual characteristics, and everything that makes you a human. So when we talk sexuality, I would say that we're even here because of sexuality. Because invariably, we'll talk about sex under sexuality, we'll talk about gender, we'll talk about everything that makes human who they are. So we actually cannot talk about all these things without sexuality. So it is who we are.
Okay, and when an LGBT person, for instance, says to, or anybody says, my sexuality is this, my sexuality is something. What does that mean?
Okay, like I said, in sexuality, there's sexual expression. So when people get to talk about their sexuality as an LGBT person, you're definitely looking at sexual orientation, sexual identity of the individual, the way the individual perceives himself. As in my concept, my own sense of what my sexual expressions are, eventually now determines what my orientations are. So I can tell you, I am attracted to this person or this kind of persons. I feel this way, and I express my sexuality in this kind of way. So most times, when you look at sexuality, for ease of definition, usually it's broken down into, I think, about 5 circles, where you have intimacy, you have sexual identity, I think you have sexualization, you have the sexual reproductive health aspect of it. Now, so when you talk about the sexual identity, that goes as far as talking about the sense of the individual sense or the perception of self in terms of their sexual response. Their sexual identity in terms of how they see themselves, how they get attracted to a fellow human being, and it also comes with how they've been able to identify themselves. So I give an example. I see myself as female. I can now say that I am female and I'm attracted to a female. Or I see myself as a male, but I'm attracted to a male or attracted to an opposite sex. So in sexuality, there is a part of sexuality that talks about the sexual orientation of the individual. So that goes further to describe now, are you attracted to the same sex or the opposite sex?
And how many orientations are there?
When we talk about sexual orientation, the truth is that people have a lot of perception. People have their own definitions, and, you know, people come up with all kinds of expressions, as it were. But again, for uniformity, for ease of definition and the likes of that, we have homosexuals, people who are attracted to same-sex people. And then we have the heterosexuals, people who are attracted to opposite sex. We have the bisexuals, people who are attracted to both males and female. You know, they can swing both ways. We have the pansexuals. I think for ease of definition, we will just stick to this. But I will say that the truth is that sexual orientation or sexuality eventually is really very fluid. As time goes on, I'm sure sometimes back it used to be just heterosexuals and homosexuals, and then people keep, you know, coming up with things. We keep learning every day. We keep getting new things. So the fluidity is actually one of the things that makes us open-minded. We just welcome things as they come. We listen. We hear things from other people's point of view. But I think for purpose of learning, we'll just stick to the 4.
Okay. This is a good place to keep it. Now let's talk about gender. Wilfred, what does gender mean? When we talk about gender, what does that mean?
Gender is more or less social, where sex is biological, gender is social. So gender, because we're human beings, we're creatures of our communities. So there are norms, there are behaviors that we have to follow through. So gender would be the social role a person is ascribed, you know, or a person is put into, you know, one by way of socialization. So when you give birth to a child as a parent, and gender normally follows from sex. So when you see male genitalia and you ascribe this person as a boy, there's some certain roles that society has said, you know, this is how boys should behave, this is how boys should be raised, and then you begin to raise the boy in that in that way, asking him to do something, speak up, you know, don't cry, you know, and all that. Be strong.
Go and wash the car.
Go and wash the car. Don't enter the kitchen.
Dishes.
Yes. Yeah, and you know, the opposite for the girl. So so that's gender. Gender could be masculine, could be feminine.
Lanre, we hear about gender identity and we hear about gender expression. Can you explain to us what those mean and the difference?
Okay, in terms of gender identity, you find, just like what Wilfred said when he spoke about socially ascribed roles as a result of culture, you know, socialization, environment, and the likes of that. Now, in the place of definition of gender, there's a role the individual plays, where the individual tells himself or herself that this is how I perceive myself. My own concept about self. You speak to gender identity. But interestingly is that my gender identity may not actually fall within the roles of my sexual characteristics. So biologically, I may present as female. And when it gets to gender now, I am not conforming to the gender roles that might have been ascribed to me as a female. That speaks to gender. So the whole limitations or the barrier, the culture, the society has defined. Women are meant to be some set of people, while the men are meant to be some set of people. But again, against all odds, we've seen women do some of those things that, you know, would not be some of the things traditionally ascribed to, you know, females. I cite an example. Maybe before now, it was perceived that some particular job roles are actually for males. Maybe engineering, flying an aircraft, you know, being scientists and the likes of that. But all those things have been broken now. So when you talk about gender identity, it's my perception about self, how I see myself, and this may not conform to sexual characteristics or roles that has been biologically ascribed to me. Now, when you now talk about expression, now it also falls in line when it talks about the way the individual wants to express him or herself, regardless of whatever roles have been ascribed when you speak to gender.
Okay, so give me an example. Now,
again, it's when you talk about gender expression now, you speak to issues around what readily comes to my head is women are not supposed to ask for sex. They are not supposed to drive that. But again,
people say that.
Yes, they do.
Okay. Apparently,
you understand. People say that women. It's not in a woman's place to ask for sex.
Yes.
You know, women are not supposed to take lead.
Where sex and sexual activity are concerned.
Exactly. You are supposed to be passive, and then somebody is the dominant, which at times the role is given to maybe the male presenting person, as it is. So in expression now is I like gender because of the fluidity.
Yes.
And daily it's obvious that we're already convincing the world that it's not static. It's not something, and once a thing is evidence-based, you can easily say that there's no truth in this.
Yes.
So in gender expression is the ability to actually express yourself irrespective of what has been ascribed to you as an individual.
So Wilfred, let's talk about people who identify as non-binary. What does that mean?
Okay, earlier we spoke about most genders being masculine and feminine, and then binary is derived from the word two, you know. So because everybody expects you to either be masculine and feminine, so when you identify as either of them, you're binary. You belong, you identify as
one or the other.
Yes, one or the other. But then there's some people who don't even identify as either of them, you know. Some people identify as both of them, depend on what time, you know, how they feel or how they want to express themselves at the time. And some people don't even identify as either of them. So those people could be described as being non-binary.
So they're neither one or the other. It's not one of two.
It's not one of two. It could be both. It could be none.
Lanre, what's the difference then between being non-binary and being trans?
Okay, taking it from where Wilfred stopped, for a non-binary person, that's gender non-conforming, they do not fit into any of the boxed definition of what gender should be. And so they are taking themselves out of the whole equation. I don't belong to any. I operate in a non-conforming. So for a lot of them, you hear things like they are fluid. They are on, it's like a journey.
Gender fluid.
So there's no identification attached to them in terms of gender. They express themselves in at their own terms. Now, when you talk about a trans person, a transgender, now, remember when we were talking, we said things like, when we talk about gender identity, it's a perception of self without necessarily correlating with my sexual identity or my sexual ascribed roles at birth. So when you speak to a transgender, a trans man or woman could actually be a sexually presenting person as a female, but who sees himself as a male. So when you look at the person, there might be everything showing that this person fits into who a male or a female should be biologically. But based on the person's identification of self, irrespective of those things, he has chosen or she has chosen to see herself otherwise. So in a trans person now, you will easily say that it is what that person has decided to call himself, either a male or a female, irrespective of whatever sexual characteristics they present with.
The non-binary person doesn't want to be in a box, in any of the two boxes.
So that's why we said the
but the transgender person
wants to be,
has been assigned one of those binary boxes, but is expressing some kind of dissatisfaction with whatever he's been assigned and wants to express himself with how he really feels.
Now, Wilfred, when we were starting the episode, you said, when we talk about sex, there's male, there's female, and then we were about to go into the others, and you hinted a little bit at them, but I wanted us to explore all these other terms before we come back here. So now, let us into what you wanted to say earlier.
Okay, so apart from the male and the female, there's also the intersex. So there's in the olden days, and I feel like medicine has a lot of blame to play in it. You know, once people look and they don't see what they expect to see, and then they assume that there's a problem initially. But years and years of education and knowledge later, we've seen that there's some people who are just not one of either of the sexes. Biologically. And it could come from the chain of biology, starting from the chromosomes down to the organs, inside and outside.
Okay.
So it could fall, it's like a continuum, it's a spectrum.
Yeah. Yes.
I think that's the word. So intersex might just be that the internal reproductive organs and the external reproductive organs do not match. That could be an example of intersex.
So a person might have internal organs that would be traditionally defined as female,
yes,
but have external sexual organs that would then be defined as male,
yes,
and vice versa.
And vice versa.
And there's more than one way that somebody can be intersex.
Yes. So that's just one, that's an example I was giving, that's just one of the ways. There are other ways. You can have an external genitalia that is not as prominent as one would have expected. You know, that's another way of presenting. It could be at the level of the hormones, you know, where there are some hormones that are predominantly male, like testosterone. There are those like estrogen that are predominantly female. So as a male child, you could have more
of
you could have male genitalia, you know, but you have more of estrogen, you know. So that's intersex also. And it could also be at the level of the chromosomes, where you have, as a male or a male presenting baby, you also have the X, you know, chromosome that is normally identified with, typically identified with the female.
So a female presenting baby would usually be thought to have XX chromosomes.
Yes.
But you could have a child a baby who presents as male, but has the XX chromosome.
Yes.
So there are actually very many ways.
Yes, it's a wide spectrum, and then they also present in different ways. So people in the past, not just in the past, even till now, people don't really understand them, and we tend to fear what we don't understand, and then we start looking for a cure where there really is no problem. You know, it's just that this person is just different than what you're used to. You know, so I think we have to do
this. This is such a great conversation, but I want to ask you one question, and then I'm going to give you both a quiz.
Okay.
Yes. That's fine. But Lanre, the question I want to ask is, why is it important that we begin to understand that people who are people first can be intersex, number two, that there's nothing wrong with that, and that people who are intersex can exist in a number of ways, can present in a number of ways? Why is it important for us to learn?
Okay, definitely learning brings some liberation, because we have a better grasp of things, and we're able to lend support to people who are found within that classification. Now, I think one of the things that is very important, and medicine has evolved, because I remembered when it started, there was the tagging, hermaphrodites, and, you know, ambiguous genitalia, you know, there was poor understanding.
And then it was a problem to be fixed.
You know, to be fixed. And, you know, and even for those who were getting fixed based on somebody else's opinion. You know, you not having a right on which exactly you want to present with. And I know for sure that there were people who were ascribed roles, possibly got fixed, and when they became of age to a point where they would have wanted something else, it became a problem. And there were people who were ascribed roles, but they were okay with whatever rules were ascribed to them. Now, the truth is that it's worthy of note to know that there are no, it's not black and white. There are people. It's a binary. It's a continuum. It's a spectrum. It's a continuum. And like Wilfred said, the reproductive system comes from one place, and then there is a breakout, and then it goes here. But for ease of understanding, there are people caught in between that spectrum.
That is such a beautiful way. That there is one, and there's here, and then there are people
in between.
And that's fine.
It's fine, because for another thing we need to also understand is that they were born that way. It has nothing to do with choice. It had nothing to do with I opted for this, or this is how I will want it to be. They were caught in between that.
Even when you say caught, okay, they exist.
They exist.
Well, yes, yes. They are in between that place.
Yes.
And for them, or as it is, it's okay.
It's
if you want to keep the two, it's okay. If you want to dominate the other, it's okay. So like I said, in educating or in letting people know is to understand that beyond the male, female, masculine, feminine, or whatever it is, there are people who would always be on that spectrum, and it's okay to be there.
That's such a wonderful way to say that. You're a beautiful storyteller, Lanre.
Thank you.
And I feel like it's a hard thing to do, but you, as a parent, you should let your child be an individual and let them decide for themselves. It's probably a very difficult thing to do, to ask a parent to, you know, just wait and let, once the child is able to express himself, he should decide, take on his own identity. You know, it's especially in Nigeria where we're big on identity, you know, and big on, you know, being
perception of people about us.
But it's something that parents should. I don't know. We should be teaching it more often from antenatal classes.
Yes, I was going to say
even
that.
Beyond the hospitals, you know, people should expect these things when they.
A place
which is what we are doing now.
Yes.
Which is what we are doing now.
Which is what we're doing now.
Hoping that when people listen to this, they understand that intersex are not cursed people. They are not people who are outcast. They are not hated. They are not evil. Because these are still, up until now, the perception of people about people who are intersex. So education is something, I believe in education, and I believe that what you don't have, you can give. So empowering people, providing people with information, giving them a good grasp of things and making them understand that this thing, they are human beings that are like this. And they are not abnormal. They are not mad. They are not possessed. They are not evil. And it's okay for them to want to express themselves in whichever way they want to express themselves. So the education is a continuous thing. It's not going to happen overnight. Because even in the medical practice, it was something that was seen as a problem that needed to be fixed. But again, it took time before people are coming to terms with it now that it's not necessarily...
You don't have to do that.
Exactly. Surgery. It's not an emergency. It's not an emergency. People can actually go and decide which they want to settle for.
If they want to settle for it.
If you want to.
All right. Are you ready for your quiz now? I have to ask
Bring it on.
Yes.
Wilfred, you first. True or false? A trans person has to have surgery.
False.
Because we said it already, it's false. You help
because I know it.
You help me too in case.
You want to cheat?
No, it's community effort. Community effort.
Lanre, true or false? A woman who wears masculine clothing is a lesbian.
Haba, false.
Why?
False.
Tell us why.
Is it because I did not come here in my...
Wilfred, gender diverse or non-binary people can feel male or female or both or none.
True.
True. Great.
So smart. You saw that.
I know, right? I know.
Next question.
Larry, true or false? People who are bisexual want to have sex with both men and women at the same time.
No. It's a choice thing. Okay, it's meant to be false, Abby. False. But you know, it's doing me. I want to...
You want to?
I want to give an explanation.
Yes.
The truth is that, remember, everything has to do with choice. So it could be that way or not that way. But based on the question you asked, it's false.
False. And last question, an intersex person has to choose one gender.
False.
False.
Oh, it's okay, no, it's not a quarrel. Well done, well done. Thank you so much for breaking this down. There's so many concepts that I know would still probably feel new to a lot of people.
Yes.
But I think that the thing we have emphasized above all is that there are many ways to be.
True.
And that every way is valid.
Yes.
And if you want to learn a little, knowledge is available.
It is really.
Education is ongoing and continuous, and both of you have done such a wonderful job of educating us all today. And I hope you have learned a little bit more about sex, sexuality, and gender. This is just a little bit of all the information that's out there. So I hope that we have given you enough to start with, and that you go on and learn more so that you can do your part in creating a more inclusive world. My name is Oladimeji. Thank you for watching. In 2018, there were over 200 reported hate crimes against LGBT people in Nigeria. Now, these were crimes carried out by fellow citizens, individuals who felt empowered to carry out acts of hate against another human being simply because of their sexuality.
They came down from the bus with guns and they had their uniform. So they asked me to bring out my ID card, which I did. And one of them said, I was looking like a lady in my ID card.
I didn't remember to be scared. I just pictured the end. I tried to imagine how this tragedy was already going to play out.
So the boy was trying to escape, but it was too late. They dragged him back, they started beating him, everything. At the end of the day, I don't know where they take him to.
Now, there's certain fundamental rights that every Nigerian citizen is entitled to. The right to privacy, the right to life, the right to freedom of association and assembly. Actually hold that, because LGBT people in Nigeria have that last right, the right of freedom to assembly and association, severely limited.
Is there ways in which we use legal structures and violence and oppression to determine someone's ability to live fully?
I think this is why we're here, to increase people's knowledge of their rights.
So I'm very happy to know that the statistics, the data is showing that perceptions are changing, that people are becoming more aware of the real life implications of these laws. Because I think when people don't understand that these laws affect people on a day-to-day basis, then they're less likely to care. So I'm really happy.
Change is coming. It's slow. It's taking a while, but it will surely come.
None of us is free until all of us are free. This is how we can have a more inclusive and a more diverse society. My name is Oladimeji. Thank you for watching.